Welcome, everyone, to the deep dive. Let's start this deep dive with a constitutional paradox that really, it defines modern India.
It's a fascinating one.
It is. The text of the Constitution describes the country as a union of states. Now, that sounds stable, fixed, federal, but here's a high-value insight our sources immediately reveal. This fundamentally federal framework is designed with a switch.
A switch is a great way to put it.
With a simple proclamation, the entire system can transform into a purely unitary, centralized structure almost overnight.
And that potential for transformation, that centralizing tilt, is what makes India's federalism so unique. It's really not like anything you'd find in the U.S. or, say, Canada.
Not at all.
We operate day to day with a division of powers, a written constitution, and a dual polity, which are all, the pillars of federalism. But deep within the structure, through instruments like the governor, the All India Services, and critically, the emergency provisions, well, there lies a profound constitutional bias toward the center.
Exactly. And that is our core mission today, to unpack this delicate structural balance. How does India maintain the strength of the Union while managing the inherent demands of its vastly diverse states? We're diving deep into the intricate mechanisms of center-state relations, focusing primarily on the definitive insights laid out in Laxmikanth's Indian Polity.
The goal is to make sure that you, the dedicated learner, get the core knowledge you need to master those tricky application-based questions.
And before we unpack the very first article, just a quick word to you, the listener. We truly appreciate you joining us for this essential deep dive, a massive shout out and a huge thank you to all our existing members and subscribers.
Your ongoing support is absolutely vital. It's what allows us to keep bringing you this super useful, high-quality analysis.
It really is. And if you are new here and find this content valuable, and we're confident you will, please take just a moment to subscribe to our channel. And if you're able, joining our paid membership tiers is really the best way to directly support the continued production of these analyses.
Please also remember to like this video and share your valuable comment below. That simple act boosts our reach immensely and helps this critical learning community grow.
Finally, a quick note on resources. We've prepared comprehensive free notes and practice previous year questions, or PYQs, related to this topic. They're available on our dedicated Telegram channel.
But if you're looking to truly upgrade your preparation, we also have premium notes, extra PYQs, and model mains answers, and those are accessible exclusively on our Discord channel for our legend YouTube members.
We highly encourage you to join those groups for a really comprehensive preparation.
Okay, so our mission today is explicitly focused on the source material. We are dissecting the three key axes of center-state relations: legislative, administrative, and financial, and we'll be analyzing the institutional frameworks designed for both cooperation and dispute management.
And we will be continuously linking these complex constitutional details back to real-world political tension and, of course, those application-based questions. Let's start as the Constitution does, at the beginning. Article 1. It declares India, that is, Bharat, shall be a union of states. Why this phrase? Why did they deliberately avoid the term federation of states? This choice isn't accidental, is it?
Not at all. It's the foundational statement of Indian political philosophy. The Constituent Assembly, according to our sources, deliberately chose union of states to convey two critical, non-negotiable implications.
Okay.
And these implications are what really separate us from classical federations like the United States. First, the Indian Federation is not the result of an agreement among the states.
So the states didn't just come together voluntarily to form the union.
Exactly. And second, and this is the one that really anchors the centralization, no state has the right to secede from the federation.
And this is the origin of that famous description of the Indian system. The indestructible union of destructible states.
That phrase is such a high-value nugget for understanding the system. The union is indestructible because the states can't leave. But the states themselves, well, they're destructible. The Indian Parliament has the unilateral power. Unilateral power, requiring only a simple majority, not some complex constitutional amendment, to alter the area, boundaries, or even the name of any state.
Wait, a simple majority? That's almost frighteningly easy, considering the magnitude of the change. Can you give us a tangible example of this power being used?
Oh, we see it constantly. The Goa, Damon and D Reorganization Act of 1987 is a classic example. And of course, the much more recent and politically charged bifurcation of the state of Jammu and Kashmir into two union territories in 2019.
Yeah.
This power confirms that the very existence of the states depends entirely on the will of the union parliament. And that fundamentally undermines the rigid federal principle where states are usually co-equal and indestructible entities like they are in the U.S.
Okay, that clarifies the central tilt right from the start. But despite this overriding central power, we still call it a federal system. So let's unpack that duality. What are the clear, defining federal elements that we operate under?
Well, the basic structure is clearly federal in nature. We have the dual polity, the union government and the state governments, and each has defined sovereign areas of operation.
Okay, that's long.
We operate under a robust, written constitution, and critically, we have a detailed division of powers, which is meticulously laid out in the 7th schedule. That schedule defines the boundaries of legislative authority. These three features are classic federal hallmarks.
But, and this is the big but, the unitary features are what really define the Indian experience. It's what leads many critics to label India as quasi-federal.
Precisely. Let's just quickly run through the 7 major unitary features. First, the single constitution. Except for certain past arrangements for specific territories, we don't have separate state constitutions. All states follow the union's basic law.
And second, single citizenship. No dual citizenship for state residents.
Then the third is the flexibility of the Constitution we just talked about, which allows Parliament to alter fundamental state structures so easily.
And the fourth is the judiciary.
The integrated judiciary. This is a massive unitary anchor that people often overlook. Unlike the U.S., which maintains separate federal and state judiciaries, the Indian single system of courts enforces both central and state laws, with the Supreme Court sitting at the very apex.
And that unified judicial structure, it's derived largely from the Government of India Act of 1935, right?
That's right. It ensures a singular interpretation and application of law across the entire nation, a very powerful centralizing force.
Okay, so that's 4. And the final 3 unitary features relate directly to central control over the state's own administrative machinery.
Absolutely. The appointment of the state governor by the center is a pivotal unitary lever. The governor, after all, acts as the center's agent.
We'll definitely come back to that.
Then there are the All India Services, the IAS, IPS, IFOS, who hold strategic posts but are ultimately controlled by Delhi. And finally, the ultimate centralizing tool, the emergency provisions, Articles 352, 356, 360. They allow the entire federal structure to just dissolve into a unitary one by a presidential proclamation with no need for a formal constitutional amendment.
That structural reality brings us to the Constituent Assembly. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar famously said the Constitution was framed after ransacking all the known constitutions of the world. Now, some critics claim it's just a bag of borrowings. What's the high-value takeaway on the framers' philosophy here?
The source material really emphasizes that while they did borrow concepts, fundamental rights from the U.S., directive principles from Ireland, cabinet government from Britain, they were intensely pragmatic.
So it wasn't just copy-paste?
Not at all. They didn't adopt any rigid model whole cloth. They took the basic structure largely from the Government of India Act of 1935, which was a colonial, centralized document, and they adapted features to suit India's unique diversity and, critically, the historical need for national unity at that time.
So the term bag of borrowings really misses the point of adaptation. The framers, they must have recognized that a loose federation, say like the U.S. model, might have just fractured a nascent India recovering from partition.
Exactly. They intentionally built in that centralizing tilt to preserve unity.
They prioritized national unity and, I suppose, responsiveness to crises over the theoretical perfection of classical federalism.
That's it perfectly. The resulting system is uniquely pragmatic. It's designed to function as federal in peacetime, but can become instantly unitary in times of crisis.
Okay, let's move from that philosophy to the operating manual. Legislative relations. This is detailed in Part E11, Articles 235 to 255. How exactly is the lawmaking authority divided?
We look at the division in 2 main ways: territorial and subject-based. Territorial jurisdiction is pretty straightforward. Parliament legislates for the entire country or any part of it. State legislatures legislate for their specific state boundaries.
Simple enough.
But even here, the center reserves special powers.
Such as the president's role in the union territories.
Precisely. The president can make regulations for the peace, progress, and good government of Union territories like the Andaman and Nicobar Islands or the newer UTs like Ladakh. And these regulations are treated on par with parliamentary acts.
And we mentioned the governor's role as a unitary feature. They also interfere with parliamentary acts in specific regions, don't they?
Yes, and this is a crucial administrative link to the whole legislative process. The governor has the power under the 5th schedule for scheduled areas and the 6th schedule for tribal areas to direct that an act of parliament does not apply to that specific area.
Or applies with changes.
Right, or applies only with specific modifications. This power ensures that central laws can be made sensitive to the unique requirements and customs of tribal populations.
Okay, so functionally, the division really relies on the 3 lists in the 7th schedule. Let's just briefly go over their scope, but focusing on where the power truly resides.
Absolutely. The Union List, List 1, is extensive. It covers nearly 100 subjects of undeniable national importance. We're talking defense, atomic energy, foreign affairs, currency, railways. Parliament has exclusive power here.
And the state list.
The state list, List 2, covers roughly 61 subjects of local importance. Public order, police, health, agriculture, and water. Here, the states typically have exclusive power.
And then there's the concurrent list, List 3, covering topics like criminal law, forests, economic and social planning. This list, I imagine, is a site of constant negotiation and potential friction.
It is. And it's also crucial to remember the history here. The 42nd Amendment Act of 1976 that significantly increased the central government's legislative scope. It transferred 5 key subjects from the state list to the concurrent list. These were education, forests, weights and measures, protection of wild animals and birds, and the administration of justice, except for the Supreme Court and high courts. This was a major centralizing move.
So if both the center and a state legislate on the concurrent list and their laws conflict, what happens? Who wins?
The general rule is clear. The central law prevails. But here's the critical exception that often pops up in Maine's questions.
Okay, let's hear it.
If the state law has been reserved for the consideration of the president and it has received his or her assent, then that state law prevails.
So the state wins.
But only within that state.
Okay, that seems like a victory for the state. But you said Parliament still holds the final card?
It does. Despite that presidential assent, the ultimate power remains with the center. Parliament can still override that state law at any time by subsequently enacting a central law on the same matter.
So it's a temporary victory for the state, at best.
Exactly. This mechanism ensures that while states are allowed some flexibility with presidential approval, the center maintains its inherent legislative supremacy over the entire concurrent sphere.
Now let's talk about those 5 extraordinary situations where the union completely breaches the federal structure and legislates on subjects that are exclusively reserved for the state list. This is a dramatic power.
It is the explicit constitutional override. The first and perhaps most commonly tested mechanism is the Rajya Sabha resolution.
The Council of States itself.
Exactly. If the Rajya Sabha, which represents the interests of the states, passes a resolution, and it needs to be supported by 2/3 of the members present and voting, declaring a state list subject to be of national interest, then Parliament can legislate on it.
How long does that last?
This power lasts for 1 year, but it can be indefinitely renewed. It's a mechanism for temporarily nationalizing a state subject.
Okay, that's one. The second and third situations relate to crises and agreements, right?
Correct. Second, during a national emergency under Article 352, Parliament's power to legislate on any matter in the state list becomes absolute. This power is temporary and ceases 6 months after the emergency ends.
And the third.
Third, when 2 or more states agree that Parliament should legislate on a stateless subject for them, Parliament can then do so. We've seen this with laws relating to prize competitions or cattle trespass, for instance.
The fourth situation seems crucial for international credibility.
Indeed. Parliament can legislate on any stateless matter purely for the purpose of implementing international treaties, agreements, or conventions. This is non-negotiable for the center, as national compliance with international obligations must be uniform across the territory, irrespective of what the states think.
Right, you can't have one state derailing a national treaty.
You can't. And the final, 5th situation brings us back to administrative failure.
President's rule.
That is when president's rule is imposed in a state under Article 356 or 365. In this scenario, the president can authorize Parliament to exercise the powers of the state legislature, effectively turning the Union Parliament into the state's lawmaking body.
Let's pivot to the second axis, administrative relations. This isn't just about sharing work, it's about control and enforcement. This is where that centralizing tilt becomes really tangible.
The key is the constitutional mandate in Part 11. It imposes a clear obligation on the states. They must ensure compliance with central laws, and more importantly, they must not impede or prejudice the exercise of the executive power of the union within the state.
So how does the union enforce that compliance? What if a state, say, refuses to implement a major environmental ruling issued by the central government?
Well, the union can give explicit directions to the states on many matters, but the enforcement teeth, that comes from Article 365.
Okay, what does that say?
It says that if a state fails to comply with any direction given by the union government, the president is empowered to hold that a situation has arisen where the state government cannot be carried on in accordance with the Constitution.
Which is the direct constitutional trigger for president's rule under Article 356. So the ultimate threat to a state's administrative autonomy is embedded in the requirement to comply with union directions.
Precisely. Now let's talk about the All India Services, AIS, the IAS, IPS, and IFOS. This is arguably the most practical and continuous unitary lever the center has.
Let's focus not just on the definition, but on the true political insight here. These officers, they work for the state, but they're managed by the center. What does that mean in practice?
It means that even when a state government is politically hostile to the center, the key administrative machinery, the chief secretary, the director general of police, the district collector, is staffed by officers who are recruited and trained by the center.
Their whole career path is controlled from Delhi.
Their ultimate career progression, their promotion, any disciplinary matters, all handled by the union. This creates a powerful, intrinsic, and unavoidable loyalty to the standards and priorities set by Delhi. It ensures that critical posts, even in remote state administrations, are subject to central influence.
So it guarantees the execution of union laws and policies no matter what.
It does. In fact, the Sarkaria Commission strongly advocated for strengthening these services even further, recognizing their importance to national integration.
That's a massive constitutional safeguard for national unity and a constant check on state autonomy. We also must revisit the role of the governor.
The governor is the linchpin of central control. They serve that dual role. The constitutional head of the state, who is bound by the advice of the State Council of Ministers and simultaneously an agent of the center president.
And they're powered to reserve certain state bills for the president's consideration.
Yeah.
That's a direct check, right?
It's a direct, non-executive check on state legislative autonomy, especially for bills that might derogate from high court powers or relate to property acquisition. They are, in essence, the eyes and ears of the center in the state.
And finally, there's administrative flexibility through delegation.
Yes, and this mechanism facilitates smoother cooperation. The president can delegate executive functions to a state government, usually with the state's consent, to reduce the burden on the center.
And it works the other way, too.
It does. The governor can entrust state functions to the union government, provided Parliament authorizes it. This ensures that the execution of functions isn't rigid, promoting a flexible, cooperative spirit where it's needed.
So we've established that the center has strong legislative dominance and administrative control through personnel and the threat of Article 365. But the real game changer for control is always the money.
That's the perfect transition. The center can give directions, but the real control comes from the power of the purse. The financial axis is where the unequal power dynamic inherent in Indian federalism becomes most acute.
The Constitution, in Part 12, lays out a robust system for tax distribution. It separates the power to levy taxes from the power to appropriate the proceeds. Give us the core insight on this resource distribution.
Well, the union government has allocated most of the high-revenue elastic taxes. Things like corporation tax, customs duties, and income tax, which is shared.
And the states get the rest.
The states are typically left with taxes that are lower yielding and inelastic. Things like sales tax before GST, land revenue, and professional taxes. This distribution inherently creates a major vertical fiscal imbalance.
An imbalance where the center collects most of the money, but the states bear the majority of the expenditure burden on services like education, health, and police.
Exactly. And to address this imbalance, the system relies heavily on grants and aid.
How does the distinction between the two types of grants reveal the political power structure?
We differentiate between statutory grants, Article 275, and discretionary grants, Article 282. Statutory grants are predictable. They are recommended by the Finance Commission, charged on the Consolidated Fund of India, and are given to states that demonstrate a genuine need for financial assistance to balance their revenue accounts.
So they're formula-based and intended for equity.
Right. But discretionary grants, that's where the political influence kicks in.
I was waiting for that.
Absolutely. Discretionary grants under Article 282 are given by the central government, often through various ministries, for any public purpose. They are tied to the executive's policy choices.
So they're not based on a formula.
Not at all. They depend on the whims of the union government, and they give Delhi tremendous leverage to influence state policy. A state government that's keen on securing discretionary funding has to align its policy agenda with the center's objectives.
It effectively turns financial need into political compliance.
That's a great way to put it.
Let's discuss the principle of exemption from taxation. How is this reciprocal immunity applied, and where are its critical limitations?
In principle, central property is immune from state taxation, and state property or income is immune from central taxation. This is, necessary to maintain the sovereignty of both levels of government.
But the immunity granted to the state isn't absolute, is it? Especially when it comes to commercial activities.
No, it's not. You mentioned the 1963 Supreme Court advisory opinion that clarified two major limitations.
Sure.
First, the immunity that states have does not extend to customs duties or excise duties. So if a state government imports machinery from abroad, the center can levy customs duty. If a state government produces goods commercially, the center can levy excise duty.
And the second limitation is about state-owned enterprises.
Yes. The immunity is specific to the functioning state itself. The property or income of state-owned corporations, companies, and statutory bodies, which operate as separate legal entities, is not immune and can be taxed by the center. This prevents states from running massive commercial empires under that constitutional shield.
Shifting to the modern era, the creation of the Goods and Services Tax, GST Council, via the 101st Amendment Act of 2016, was a massive step toward mandatory fiscal cooperation. Why is this considered the ultimate embodiment of cooperative federalism?
Well, before GST, taxation was a zero-sum game. The center took one set of taxes and the states took another. GST required a complete surrender of fiscal autonomy on indirect taxes by both levels of government, placing them into a single shared pool.
And Article 279A established the GST Council as the joint forum to manage this new regime.
The joint forum, that's the key.
The council is recommendatory, but its decisions are incredibly binding in practice, given the revenue implications. How does the voting mechanism ensure cooperation rather than just central dominance?
The mechanism is engineered for consensus. Decisions in the GST Council require a majority of not less than 3/4 of the weighted votes of the members present and voting.
And the weighting system is critical.
It's everything. The central government's vote has a weight of 1/3 of the total votes cast, and the votes of all the state governments taken together have a weight of 2/3.
So doing the math, the center cannot unilaterally impose its will, and the states can't just gang up and pass measures without the center's agreement. It forces both parties to the table to compromise.
Exactly. Its recommendatory role covers everything from which taxes merge into GST, which goods are exempt, and, of course, the rate slabs. This institutional design, forcing states and the center to sit together and vote, is the most profound recent shift towards cooperative fiscal federalism we've seen.
It's a huge change from the often confrontational environment that characterized the previous taxation structure.
It really is.
Finally, we have to mention the key balancing institutions, the Finance Commission, and of course, the replacement of the Planning Commission with the NITI Aayog.
The Finance Commission under Article 280 is the constitutional body. It's often referred to as the balancing wheel of fiscal federalism. It's quasi-judicial, and its sole purpose is to recommend the formula for vertical and horizontal devolution of shared taxes and the principles for statutory grants.
It addresses the constitutional necessity for distribution. But the historical tension was with the Planning Commission, which often overshadowed it.
Precisely. The Planning Commission was a non-constitutional body, but through its allocation of massive discretionary grants for the 5-year plans, it often undermined the constitutional role of the Finance Commission. It concentrated immense financial power politically in Delhi.
And now we have NITI Aayog.
Since 2015, the Planning Commission has been replaced by the NITI Aayog. NITI Aayog is a think tank, and its stated goal is to foster cooperative federalism by involving states in strategic planning, and in doing so, avoiding the pitfall of undermining the statutory authority of the Finance Commission.
Given the complexity of these three axes of power, conflicts are, well, they're inevitable. So let's look at the institutional safety nets designed to resolve disputes and foster dialogue, starting with one of the thorniest issues in India, interstate water disputes.
Water is so politically sensitive, which makes it very difficult to resolve through normal channels. Therefore, the Constitution grants Parliament exclusive power to adjudicate disputes relating to the use, distribution, or control of waters of any interstate river or river valley.
And critically, Parliament can also exclude the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court and other courts in these matters. Why that exclusion?
The framers understood that water disputes are often highly technical, politically charged, and, emotionally driven. Relying solely on the judiciary, which primarily interprets law, risked endless litigation.
So they created a specialized route.
They did. By empowering Parliament to establish specialized tribunals, like through the River Boards Act and the Interstate Water Disputes Act, they created a mechanism for technical and equitable resolution. The idea was to prioritize management over purely legal interpretation.
We mentioned the Krishna Water Disputes Tribunal I from 1969, which involved Maharashtra, Karnataka, and Andhra Pradesh. This highlights that this is a constantly utilized, vital mechanism for shared resource management.
It's a mechanism that has to be constantly revised and invoked, especially given the changing climate and the increasing demands on our shared resources.
Now, moving to more general governance issues and policy friction, we have the Interstate Council under Article 263. This sounds like the constitutional mandate for continuous dialogue.
It is the formal constitutional forum for that. The president can establish it, and its mandate is threefold. First, to advise upon disputes between states, though its advice is not binding like a court order.
And the other two.
Second, to investigate and discuss common subjects between states or between the center and the states. And third, to make recommendations for better coordination of policy and action.
This is where the political reality and the constitutional ideal really intersect. The Sarkaria Commission really pushed for strengthening this body, didn't it?
It did, emphatically. The Sarkaria Commission, recognizing the intense political friction throughout the 70s and 80s, strongly recommended establishing a permanent interstate council. They even suggested renaming it the Intergovernmental Council.
And their core idea?
Their core idea was to make it the central coordinating mechanism for those last two clauses, policy investigation and coordination, to ensure that dialogue was continuous, not just sporadic.
And how is the council structured to ensure it has maximum influence?
Well, it's highly political. It's chaired by the Prime Minister himself. Its members include the chief ministers of all states and UTs with legislative assemblies, plus 6 union cabinet ministers.
So it's a very high-level body.
Exactly. Because it's high level and focused on examining, discussing, and deliberating on issues of common national interest, it becomes the institutional response to those federal challenges that are often asked about in the mains examinations.
Beyond this constitutional body, we also have the zonal councils. What is their key distinction from the Interstate Council?
The distinction is their origin. Zonal councils are statutory bodies. They were established under the state's Reorganization Act of 1956, not the Constitution itself. They are advisory bodies focused on regional cooperation, grouping several states together.
And they help with what, specifically?
They help foster cooperation on specific regional issues, things like border disputes, economic planning, or issues related to linguistic minorities.
And who leads these regional coordination efforts?
A strong central hand guides them. The Union Home Minister is the common chairman of all 5 zonal councils. The chief ministers of the states within the zone then rotate as vice chairman. This structure ensures central participation and leadership in regional problem solving.
And the Northeastern Council is a special case, right?
It is. It was established by a separate act in 1971. Its members include all 8 northeastern states. It has a much broader, more active role than the general zonal councils.
In what way?
It focuses heavily on formulating a unified, coordinated regional plan, and it reviews measures specifically for the maintenance of security and public order in that sensitive region. This really highlights the region's specific needs for integration and planning.
We started this deep dive with the central paradox, India's ability to flip from federal to unitary. This section, the emergency provisions, is the mechanism for that unitary tectonic shift.
It is the ultimate expression of the central government's power and, the framers' fear of national disintegration. It allows the system to switch mode entirely without requiring any formal constitutional amendment.
The 3 types being national, state, and financial.
Right. National under Article 352, state or president's rule under 356 and 365, and financial under Article 360.
Let's focus on president's rule, state emergency, as this has historically generated the most political controversy. What are the 2 constitutional grounds for its proclamation?
The first is the failure of constitutional machinery in the state, which is Article 356. The second, which is often overlooked but just as potent, is the state's failure to comply with or give effect to directions given by the Union. That's Article 365.
And once it's proclaimed,
The president, acting through the governor, assumes all executive functions of the state government, and the state legislature's powers are transferred to Parliament.
we've seen chronic political abuse of Article 356 over the decades. What are some of the classic examples of improper imposition that led to constitutional outcry?
The source material highlights several forms of misuse. Historically, a clear misuse was dismissing a ruling party in a state simply because it suffered a massive defeat in the general elections to the Lok Sabha.
That happened in 1977 and 1980, right?
Yeah.
9 state governments were dismissed solely for that reason.
Infamously, yes. Other misuses include the governor making a personal assessment of a ministry's lack of support without allowing a floor test, or imposing rules simply on vague grounds like maladministration or corruption, which are not proper constitutional triggers.
What was the political atmosphere like when the Sarkaria Commission addressed this abuse? The 80s were a time of intense center-state friction.
There was significant public demand for accountability and restraint. The widespread, arbitrary use of Article 356 was seen as threatening the basic spirit of federalism.
Which is why their recommendations are so powerful.
Exactly. The Sarkaria Commission urged that Article 356 must be used very sparingly in extreme cases as a last resort. That advice was a direct response to political expediency overriding constitutional prudence.
Let's move to the highest form of centralization, the national emergency under Article 352, declared on grounds of war, external aggression, or armed rebellion. How does this impact fundamental rights?
When a national emergency is declared, Article 358 immediately comes into play. The 6 fundamental rights guaranteed under Article 19 are automatically suspended. No separate presidential order is needed. The state is then free to make any law that encroaches upon those 6 rights.
The 44th Amendment Act of 1978 introduced a critical safeguard here, learned from the excesses of the 1975 emergency.
That amendment was vital. It enshrined the rule that Articles 20 and 21, the right to life and personal liberty and protection in respect of conviction for offenses, can never be suspended, even during a national emergency.
So that ensures the state can't violate the most basic human rights, regardless of the crisis level.
Correct. The 44th Amendment also reduced the parliamentary approval period from 2 months to 1 month, tightening political control over the proclamation.
And what about the crucial principle of judicial review over the declaration itself? Can it be challenged?
Yes, the power of judicial review, which was temporarily removed during the 1975 emergency, was restored and confirmed by the Supreme Court in the landmark Minerva Mills case of 1980.
And what did the court say?
The court explicitly confirmed that the proclamation of a national emergency is not immune from judicial review. It can be challenged in court on grounds of malafide or bad faith, or if the declaration was based on wholly irrelevant extraneous facts, or was just absurd or perverse. Even the ultimate unitary power is subject to constitutional checks.
We have spent a significant amount of time breaking down the legal, administrative, and financial levers that make India's federal structure so flexible, yet so centralized. For you, the learner, it's vital to synthesize this constitutional knowledge and connect it directly to current affairs and complex policy questions.
That's the real utility of this deep dive. Let's look at a few connections to those past questions. We discussed the governor's role in scheduled areas and the 5th schedule under Article 244. A past question asked us to analyze the impact of non-implementation of the provisions of the 5th schedule on the growth of left-wing extremism.
That immediately links the failure of a specific administrative mechanism to a major internal security threat. The 5th schedule provisions are designed to protect tribal land and prevent exploitation.
So if the governor and the state administration fail to enforce the special protections, it leads to alienation, resource grabbing, and a breakdown of constitutional trust,
creating a perfect vacuum for extremism. The constitutional detail becomes a policy analysis tool.
Here's another core example. Our discussion on legislative distribution and the power of the purse. A previous question asked us to establish the relationship between land reforms, agriculture productivity, and elimination of poverty.
Okay.
Land reforms fall primarily under the state list, but poverty elimination and agriculture productivity require massive central funding and coordination. You have to understand the limits of state legislative power and the extent of central financial levers through NITI, Aayog, GST, and grants to really analyze why land reforms have succeeded or failed regionally. The structure dictates the pace of development.
And finally, our study of this structure emphasizes that India's governance is moving downward. Our brief mention of the panchayats and municipalities from the 73rd and 74th Amendments shows that while the center retains its grip on large-scale issues and crises, administrative responsibilities are constantly being devolved to the local level.
It makes India's federal structure a three-tiered, living organism, constantly evolving.
Absolutely.
Our final takeaway today is that India's federalism is not defined by constitutional rigidity, but by political adaptability. It is a system built to centralize during threats and cooperate during policy formulation. It constantly emphasizes coordination while possessing the power to impose control.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you to chew on. We detail the recommendations of the Sarkaria Commission, especially the need for a permanent, strengthened intergovernmental council and the advice to use President's rules sparingly. When we consider the history of political friction, is the ultimate effectiveness of India's federal structure actually less dependent on the sacred text of the Constitution and more reliant on the political conventions, mutual trust, and dialogue established between the center and the states?
In essence, is political will the true basic structure of cooperative federalism in India? Something critical to consider as you review the notes on this chapter.
On that note, we must wrap up this deep dive. A huge thank you once more to all our paid members and subscribers. Your support is the foundation of this channel.
And if you are a new listener, please take that final action. Subscribe, like this content, and leave us a comment. We really do thrive on your engagement.
Remember, free notes and PYQs are waiting for you on our Telegram channel. And the premium notes, extra PYQs, and Model Mains answers are on Discord exclusively for our Legend members. Keep digging deeper into the complexities of the Indian Constitution.
We'll see you on the next deep dive.